Morris, thanks again for coming and sharing your insight. I think you've taught me a lot just from me observing you. I think your wisdom and your demeanor in dealing with people and your love for people is something that I saw in my dad, and I see it in you, and I learn so much from you. And I think I come to you whenever I have a question or a concern and something I need advice on, and you're always there for me. And that's because I have so much respect for the way you view things, especially from a business standpoint and just from life, from life experiences and being able to help me to make sound decisions. So I just want to say that publicly. Thank you. Thank you for that.
You're most kind. You're very welcome.
So in your presentation, you spoke about principles and principle and how it's the bedrock and the foundation. Can you just expand on that a bit? Just just on those views.
When I was preparing for the session, and the mandate that you gave in terms of what you wanted to deliver to the audience, one of the things that I continue to share with those, particularly if you're under 40, and I'm just trying to mark generations, right? It's not necessarily everybody. Is that there are things that in life work, and they will always work. Gravity works. Don't try to change gravity. Use gravity to get to where you want to go. And so when we remove the bedrock of what our foundations are built upon, or we try to remove it, we end in a loop or a cycle. And we find ourselves trying to figure out, why can't I get this right? Why is my life always going in this direction? I make 5 steps forward and 12 backward. Why do I repeat the same things over and repeatedly? And when I see that, I challenge those who would listen, look, what are you really trying to do? Why are you trying to do that? And what did you miss in the process? And so the example that I use with my father's generation, I'm amazed that that era, they had very little, but families were stronger, community was stronger. There were issues that everybody fought for. We're going to fight for education. We're going to fight for equal rights. Women and men will have opportunities, etc. And nowadays, and they made that possible for the generations. What they made possible for the generations afterward was the thing that we go to college for, university, we get degrees in. And now, rather than using that level of achievement to build communities, we use education to destroy one another. And we do it unintentionally, So we compete in an environment, for instance, based on what we've achieved educationally. But I got news for some of us. Do you know that the #1 problem of the previous century was education? And the proof is, in the 21st century, it's becoming irrelevant. What's missing is knowledge. And if we're not careful, what the generation before us was really doing was, they were saying, look, here is how we continue to build our families, communities, and nations. We went after the tool that they use, made the tool God, and now that small g is coming back to haunt us, because we can't live together, we can't build strong families together. We have to have alternatives to try and find fulfillment, and the alternatives themselves are creating issues for us.
So in your opinion, what's the answer then? How do we move past that?
Look to see what the generations before us did well. So what did they do well? My father's generation, again, my dad would take us on weekends and we'd go and hail aunts. By the way, I live on an island 21/7, so doing this was fairly easy. Hail aunts, find out how they were doing, tell them what we were doing, They would give us something out of their yard to eat, et cetera, et cetera. And so we had strong family bonds. Well, they got that right, building strong family bonds. So what we need to do is, boy, now that I'm educated, now that I run a successful business, how do I cause strong family and the results that strong families produce, how do I cause that to prevail? And so what we did in our company was anybody who came into the company and they can go through the employment process, the first thing that happens with them once they reach a certain stage in joining the company is I go and I have a conversation with them. And the conversation is, I challenge everybody to do what I just did here. I ask the question, who are you? Based on whether you've done that or not before, I challenge you to write down who you are. And the reason why that we do it is because what my father's generation did well is you never had issues around self-esteem, self-worth, or concept about why family was important. That's not there now. And you know what I found, Charo? Every time I ask a human being who they are and challenge them to write down, 99% of the time they end up in tears. Nobody's ever asked me that question before, is what I'm told. And boy, I don't know who I am. Well, if you don't know who you are, who am I hiring? Somebody who comes to work happy today and great at customer service, and tomorrow the customer tells me to fire them because, really? The same person I just hired? But I find that the ones who begin on this journey of really knowing who they are, what ends up happening is they stay longer, they start to do the things that they really want to do in their lives, and ultimately they become better citizens. A quick story. I have a goal that especially young men, when they come into the organization, single and rambunctious and believe they're the Mac daddies of the organization, I have a goal. Hang around me long enough, you'll find a wife and you'll build a family. Every young man who was with me today found a wife and is building a family.
Wow, that's great. So in knowing yourself and getting others to know who they are, how do you deal with someone that says they don't know who they are? How do you get them through the process of discovery? How do you help them through the process of discovery?
By getting them to understand, either through the work that we do, through the positioning that we take, that it is possible to achieve what you really want to achieve. That's not readily visible to the world outside, and challenging their thought process. You see, let me put it this way. I figured out a long time ago that I cannot make people do anything. Right? And employers have a tendency to want to force that on those who work with them. So I figured out the best thing I can do is make an offer to you. And the offer is, if you discover yourself, you can live with yourself. But it takes you to want to discover yourself. So we would tell people, when we first got started, meet me halfway, and I'll help you. I stopped saying that. Meet me 100% of the way, because if you come halfway, that means you have the opportunity to go backward. And so, again, it's a matter of challenging your mindset about your life, the results your life is producing, and what you need in order to make sure that you take the steps necessary to move on.
Yeah, and just going off what you said, you shared in your presentation that the teacher appears when the student is ready, right? And for me, that hit home, right? Because I was my dad has been my father my entire life, right?
I hope so.
My entire life he's been my father, but it wasn't until the age of 26 or 27 that he became a mentor to me, and it was because, and it wasn't that he didn't want to be a mentor, and when I say mentor, I mean the fact that I submitted myself to him to be mentored. Mentorship works two ways, right? It's a two-way street. Someone can't mentor me if I don't submit myself to them to be mentored. So it wasn't until I was 26 or 27 that I, made the decision that I was going to let my dad be my mentor. And I think this statement is true. My dad was always there, but the teacher showed up when I was ready. And I think for, just for you as a business owner who likes to develop people, and sometimes it's hard to get through to, some of your employees. Your colleagues. There you go. I got you.
You were paying attention.
Yes. It's hard to get through to them because they aren't ready at the time. So, are you patient with them, or do you try to push them along? How do you deal with those employees that seem to be a little more difficult than those colleagues that seem to be a little more difficult than others?
Honestly, if there's one thing I've been accused of most of my business career, is that Ethan, you're too soft with people sometimes. And my response is, you don't see what I see. I find it amazing that we could read and go after the best books and CDs, and somebody saying, man, Chiro, you have to get this book. You have to read this. And you pick up this book, and you read it, and you put it down, and you didn't learn a single, let me put it the way the old people would put it, a blessed thing in the book. Why is that? Is that because the principles or whatever the book? No, it's you're not ready. And so what helps me is, Chiro, it's not difficult for me at all. When people appear not to be getting it, I figured out that's when they're actually getting it. What they're doing is they're protecting themselves from being vulnerable and being exposed, and the stuff that's happening on the inside is really happening on the inside. I would feel awful if I went home and didn't do what Daniel just talked about. Should I say Daniel, or should I say, what's his name?
Cain.
Cain, yeah, sorry. Every opportunity I get to speak to anybody on anything that they want to ask me that I can share with them, I make that opportunity, because if I watch their face or their body language and figure they didn't get it, I will be the biggest hypocrite there is on the face of the earth. People get it because, again, principles are principle. They do not change. And so the language for me is a language of principles. And that's why I say I want to get into your thinking. Because as a man thinks, in his heart, so is he. And where's your heart? Here. Your heart is not what's beating in your chest in this reference. And so, what's wrong? What is our greatest challenge? Our thinking.
I think for me, in your presentation, the one question I would have that I have for you is, you said the sky is not the limit. You are, therefore, act like your dream. What do you mean when you say act like your dream?
I was working as a young first degree college graduate in the most unlikely place for me, based on what I understood college graduates go after. $160 a week with an associate's degree in accounting, and I went to work for a warehouse. And I noticed something about the owner of the warehouse. I had this picture there. This is a wholesale food distribution warehousing thing. I noticed something about him. He got to work before everybody else. He left after everybody else. He was involved at that time with everything in the business. He made it his business to ask questions to get to the bottom of the issue. Guess what I started to do? Yeah. To the point where to this day people still call me Mr. Butler. Those of you who are not Bahamian, you won't get that joke. And so I began to act the way I saw myself in the future. And what that helped me to do is, while I was making $160, I know Americans, you cannot fathom $160 a week. I know it, not at $22 an hour as the minimum wage or something like that. But $160 a week, not for a 35-hour week, but for a 40-hour week. And I began to act as though I was already running a multi-million-dollar business based on what he showed me. And so I removed the limitations very early. And it took me 16 years, 17 years before we opened the first, as we call our gas stations or convenience stores, we call them training centers. It took me 16 years before I opened the first one. And on average, every year and a half, maybe 2 years thereafter, we open another, we open another, we open another. So I acted like my dream from early on.
That's good. That's good. So I'll open the floor to any questions. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So my question for you is, how do you balance with your teammates, your colleagues, helping them to identify their most authentic selves while you help them to develop their most authentic selves as your employee? So the balance is between helping them to identify where their knowledge, skills, and abilities are to develop their most authentic selves, and then help them achieve their dreams and goals as your employee.
So the balance to me is easy. And I take that position because if I get on the boat with them, then I won't be able to help them, right? So again, I mean this in every literal sense. When a team member gets to the place where they're ready to sign the contract for employment, before they sign the contract for employment, I invite them. The conversation can go for 3 hours. In my early days, it went to 6 hours.
That's good.
I invite them to write down the answer to the question for themselves: who are you? If it's recorded, they have something to begin to look at every single day.
Yes.
So part of their file, I say to them, I don't mind what you have written on your application form, nor do I trust any of the reference letters that you got from
That's good.
your cousin who doesn't have the same last name as you do,
Yeah.
but you got them to sign the form saying you're honest, reliable, trustworthy, hardworking. I say that is an absolute lie, because you will all go temporarily insane.
That's good.
So when I challenge people that way, then they have to walk away, write down the answer to the question, who are you?
Yeah.
I take it and put it on file. They keep the original, and I said, that's J-Mel's gift to you for the rest of your life.
Okay.
Identify. The next thing that we do is, how do we have them to live it and to develop it, etc.? Simple. We pump gas. Show up to work on time, learn inventory control, learn how to manage cash and don't steal, make sure customer service is top of what you do. By the way, we say customer service is not something you do. Customer service is the result of how you feel.
Yes.
So we constantly
That's
keep
good.
people connected to their true selves, because it's a result. When you clean the windshield for a customer, thank you for coming, what you're actually telling that customer is how you see yourself.
That's good. Self-identification.
Yeah.
That's
and
good.
So we get it wrong frequently, but we remind ourselves of what it is that we're supposed to be doing. And so how do we get them to do it? Well, what are we teaching really when we say manage your report, make sure it's done on time, make sure it's accurate? We're teaching them management skills.
Right.
What are we teaching when we say come to your shift before the shift starts to prepare? We're teaching them ownership mentality.
Yeah.
What do we teach them when we say take somebody who just joined the organization and tell them how they themselves can benefit based on how you benefit? We're teaching them leadership skills.
That's good.
So, and that means that they're leaving what they met better than they met it. You know what our vision statement is? We are an incubator for management, ownership, and leadership. That's how we do it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Brother Moss, Mark Thompson. As descendants of Africa, whether we're in the Bahamas or in America, one of the things we have a challenge with is multi-generational wealth. And you've built a platform and a business that has the potential to be multi-generational. How do you plan, expect, structure to ensure that your children's children's children can benefit from the labor that you've invested in your training centers?
Ethan and Edward, stand up. They're here.
You know, oftentimes children don't take the mantle that the father creates, which is one of the things I celebrate about Charo and Charissa. They've actually embraced it. But you can find children who have had their fathers and mothers build something, and they do, I want to do music, and they go do something else. Or they want to be an entertainer, and they go do something else. And that gift that was created that should be blessing generations gets purchased or squandered or mismanaged, and Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies disappear because the next generation didn't love what the father loved or what the mother loved. How do you protect that for the Morse family?
I almost want to do what I did just now. They will hate me for it, so I won't do it. Mark, I think that the only thing that I can do is prepare those who are supposed to make sure that it gets next generation. The only thing that I can do is live in the front of them, show them what I do, teach them what I do, and free them to make decisions, understanding that they too have the responsibility to pass on what they inherit to somebody else. Because principles are principle. The principles don't change. And you cannot force it on. As much as I would like to grab them and force it on them, my son said to me, "Daddy, I am man now, I am 17. Really? So we bring them along. We teach them. So Ethan got to work in the business for the first time last year. I don't know what else you do except teach the principles, of which I said to both my sons, who accused Teresa and I of having children in our old age, I said to them, know who you are, go to work first, get your wife, have your family, bring me the grandchildren, and I will teach them everything I'm teaching you. So in case you think that, you know, I was too old, then I'll teach it to your children. I don't know what else you do.
April Ripley from Atlanta. So welcome everyone to Atlanta. I'm so excited. We found out, like, yes, they're coming to Atlanta. But Miles Jr. and Charissa, thank you so much for bringing not just a physical conference to Atlanta, but also the spirit of which the conference rests upon. So we honor both of you today and we celebrate. Yes, we definitely. And I'm really excited because we have a large number of our young adult ministry that's here. And when you were, Mark just kind of triggered something, Mr. Moss, when you were asking about, you know, not necessarily being the same as your, you know, what your parents do necessarily, but I find that even in creation, right, if I took a rock and I chipped away pieces of it, there's still traces of that original DNA that'll always come out. We're just in a different form. So instead of looking at it negatively and trying to be different than, and really celebrate that heritage that's there, that planted, which leads me to my question for you, Mr. Moss. You talked about understanding the difference between bedrock and foundation. Could you elaborate a bit more on that, please, sir?
I opened up a can of worms, eh? Another can of worms. I mean, it's...
The fish are excited about that can of worms.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, every generation is a foundation for the generation that follows it. And what we have a tendency to want to do is to look at the faults of the generation before us and try to fix the faults of the generation before us. But can I tell you something? Every fault has its own solution or reward built into it. And we miss what the generation before us got right or did well. Because whatever that was or is, that is what we're supposed to build upon. But if we try to go and take away the foundations of which the generation before us was built upon, then actually we have nothing to build on because it will crumble. Bedrock never moves. And bedrock is simply principles. That's the analogy I'm making, right? And so the principle of how you build families, or the principle of gravity, or the principle of how you reproduce, and those things don't change. If you found a generation that found how that they change, let that generation keep it to themselves, okay? So I'm sure the point I wanted to make here is that, for goodness sake, let's not destroy what the generations before us did because we go after trying to fix the faults. Let's build on what they got right, because perhaps the things that they didn't get right are the things that we, the generation that you're in, those are really the opportunities for us. I hope I'm clear.
Thank you. Yes.
Hello, I'm Dr. Mary Warren from Dallas, Texas, and I'm here with my friend Apostle Eartha Wright and my mentor, Pastor Dr. C.E. Looney. And I am here, I'm so excited about what's happening here today. And just my question to you is, one of the things that you made a comment about is, and I'm a pastor also, and you made a comment about needing people. And I've been in HR for over 20 years. I had my own dry cleaners. I did a desktop publishing business. And, but there's also something about, to get something you never had, you have to do something you've never done. And one thing that I heard you say earlier about is needing people and knowing that you cannot get that to that place by yourself. And how do you do that in a society? And many times, even I'm the encourager, trying to encourage, but sometimes when you live in a place at times where people say, you get yours, I've got mine, and you're not piggybacking off of somebody else's success, how do you get to that place to get something that you never had or never done and need people and to tell people, I need you? Even though you've been the encourager, who are the people that you look at to bring into that place, to encourage you to get to that place that you've never been?
I don't
and
know.
I'm 61, by the way.
Pastor, I don't know. All I can tell you is, if you come to the place where you understand you need people, and you accept that as the premise of which you're going to operate from, then you will attract to your life the people that you need. Now, here's what we do. We curse the grass that is not growing on our side. And what I mean by that is, the negative people that come into your life, they come to prove your life. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes.
And so a hater, or somebody who you think you should be getting encouragement from them, or they should come to be a part of what you're doing and celebrate you, and they want to figure out, you again, you're 61, how dare you try to, and you hear that sort of comment? If you're focused on what you're supposed to do, what will that type of comment do for you? It will confirm that you're doing what you're supposed to do. So you don't go seeking negative people or those who are not celebrating you, but when you come across them, you let them affirm that you're doing the right thing, or you learn from what they are telling you. I found that there are not as many haters as we think. We just don't like people to tell us what we need to hear when we need to hear it. Please don't misquote me. There are haters out there. There are people who will definitely try to destroy you for whatever their reason is. As somebody who says they're in the people's business, I listen to every comment. I learn from every comment, and I decide when I will apply the principle to do the thing that is next. This is life. This is life.
And if it's not necessarily just the haters, it's just getting the people. What did you do? How did you get the people that helped you get to the place that you were going?
I just continue to create the value for people. In other words, the principle that says that every human spirit needs to be validated, appreciated.
Yes.
I just do it. And what's interesting is when you give that off to the world, it gives it back to you. Now, if I'm looking for perfect people, if I'm looking for that perfect or ideal employee, I'm the crazy one, not them.
Yes.
Okay?
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ralph Clear. Question for you. At the beginning of your talk, you showed an image of 3 guys that you kind of got things started with, I guess, whether you're friends or just people that you interacted with. Like, were they your friends, or was it like family, or what was that? And then I have a follow-up question depending on how you want.
No, they weren't friends at all. As a matter of fact, one worked with me at a previous job, and he was leaving to go and do something. I said to him, "You're not going to do that. Come go with me. Let me help you."
Okay.
The other one, one of the other ones, I asked around who could help me run this fuel business. He actually taught us the business because he grew up in it from 14 years old.
Yeah.
And then the other one came as a recommendation or request from a family friend of Teresa and I. So I have this nephew of mine who was here to go to college. He needs that environment because it's flexible for his hours at college, and that's how we got started.
And so those guys were with you from the beginning to this point?
Absolutely.
How did you do that, right? So because all of us have friends and colleagues that we've worked with in some capacity, but trying to pull something together, get it started, and then the longevity of that is usually the challenge. Like, how do you keep everybody engaged? How do you keep everybody in line? How do you leverage everybody's skill set so they feel motivated to work and partner and bring the best product to the table? Like, how do you, like, what are 1 or 2 principles that you'd say that you leverage to kind of keep that going?
Okay, so this would require us to have, for Charo to invite me back and send a limo to pick me up from the airport. But Brother Claire, I'll say it this way. What my mentors helped me with in applying it in the work environment was this principle. Always make the vision bigger than you as an individual. So you may carry a vision. You may be the one who's starting this thing, right? Or somebody in the group is. And each one of those people who are going to submit to it, they have to submit to something bigger than you as an individual or or the friendship that you've built. Because there are going to be days when we disagree. There are going to be days when we do not see the financial, legal, marketing, operations, we don't see the congruency on those days, other than the Lord himself helping you, you better have something that he has given you, and that is the vision. And so for each one of these guys, I've said to them, I can never pay you your worth. Never. And nor will I try.
And they stayed?
And they stayed. Because
I
the
hope no
vision
one tries
was
to
bigger.
me. 'Cause
Because the vision was bigger. And here's what the vision was. Do you want to be a part of helping to build a community, to transform from Charo's dad, followers into leaders, et cetera, et cetera. Got it?
Yeah, got it. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anna Moss from the Bahamas. My question is, I think you kind of touched on it just now, but I know you talked about working as a team and having your wonderful team members here, but you're also the leader. So my question is, what do you do, or what steps do you take when, as a team, you don't agree, or there are members on your team who aren't functioning to the best of their ability? How do you have to then make those leadership decisions, even amongst being a team or encouraging this team environment?
Actually, the same answer I just gave there.
Vision.
being the leader doesn't mean that I'm not submitted to the vision itself. It's interesting how that works, right? But any of you who run your own companies, organizations, and you've got this vision of what it is that you want to achieve, remember the team are going to, with them around you, they're going to help you to see farther than you've seen so far. And then you have to submit yourself to the very vision that you carry. And I find that that's when you get trusted with more of the vision. So if I'm the person who is saying to the team, look, when we have people to come in for interviews, we've got to make sure that we are listening to hear whether we can help them based on where we are, and don't just hire people because it's your cousin, et cetera, and somebody calls me because they're my church member, my cousin, say, hey, Moss, I need a job, and I don't have a process that is transparent to those other leaders, guess what will happen? We will go nowhere very quickly. And so I'm submitted to the same process. I have my wife's nephew. We had a little function here the other day, and not here, but home to my house. And my son said, you know, he's mad at you because he didn't get a summer job and the other cousin got one. And I asked a simple question, did he fill in the application form? Tell him what to do now. Tell him to go and fill in the application form. Here's the address to go and fill it in. And once he fills it in, then I can help him that way. Right? So I'm submitted to the very thing that I'm asking my team to be submitted to.
Thank you.
That's good. Well, that was the last question. We lost time. You'll be able to ask it later on in the panel. Yeah. So, Mr. Moss, thank you again, once again, sir. Always a pleasure sitting under your teaching, your tutelage. I'm sure everyone was inspired and empowered by what you had to say.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'd do it all day if you let me.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.